So did you hear that, Steve? She has 45 minutes.
45 minutes. All right, let's go. Ready?
Ready.
Yep.
Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter. And I'd like to welcome to our show one of our co-hosts, Christy from Pack Your Pixie Dust. How you doing today, Christy?
I am fine. How are you, Steve?
Not too bad. And you know, one of the biggest questions that we get, or we get a lot, is advice on port excursions and what port excursions to take and how to save money on port excursions. And so I think that this is going to be a fun episode to kind of address some of those topics. What do you think, Christy?
Oh, I think it's going to be fun. And I have wanted to get an update from our guest on how her cruise went, and we just weren't able to connect. So this is going to be perfect because now I get more than just a quick email.
I'd like to welcome back to the show Carol from Florida. How are you doing today, Carol?
I'm doing fantastic.
Well, thanks so much for reaching out and offering to talk to us about this subject. We are going to talk about your cruise up to Alaska. We've had a lot of different Alaska cruises where we've looked at, experiences on the ship, and we have touched on port excursions, but I really like the fact that you guys did something a little bit different up there and you were willing to talk about it, and that is how to save some money on your port excursions.
Absolutely. I think everybody knows that Alaska can be a little bit pricey, and so we'd been to Alaska before. And so we were looking to do certain things in Alaska and try to figure out how we could save money by doing those.
On this cruise was on the Norwegian Joy this past summer. Can you tell us when it left and, kind of give us a rough time frame of when you guys cruised and who all went on the cruise with you?
So we left, it was June 8th, I believe, on the Norwegian Joy out of Seattle. And I was with my husband and my 3 children, and they are 12, 10, and my daughter is 7.
So that magic number 5, which is tough to book, right, Christy?
Yes.
It is tough. It's yes.
Yes, family 5s are hard.
Yeah, just trying to figure out how to fit everybody into a stateroom. Well, before we talk about that, I just want to get a quick feedback from you on the Norwegian Joy. The Norwegian Joy was originally built by Norwegian. It's a breakaway class, so similar to the Bliss that we've talked about in the past and the Getaway, which our family's been on. It was originally built to sail out of China or over in Asia, and they have since brought it back, and it is now sailing in the Caribbean and up to Alaska. I just wanted to get your thoughts overall on the ship and what you thought of her before we talk into some of the port excursions and how you fit a family of 5 on board a ship.
We really enjoyed the Norwegian Joy. There were a lot of things for kids to do on there, and our kids are a little bit older. When they were younger, maybe not quite as much, but their ages were perfect for it. We really had a good time. We looked at this particular ship partly because it went out of Seattle. We wanted to fly in and out of Seattle. I had some meetings that were in Washington, so it actually worked out extremely well for me. That's sort of the reason we chose Seattle as our location.
Okay, a little bit cheaper than Vancouver, too, generally for most people flying from further around the country to get into as far as airfare goes as well, right?
Yes, we found that as well. That is absolutely correct.
So, Carol, with your family of 5, you have obviously a couple of different options. You can look for a cabin that would fit all 5 of you in the cabin. So typically those options are limited or you're going into a much larger suite. Or you can do a split cabin where you divide up the adults from the kids and you have 2 cabins. What option did you choose?
Yes, and we looked at that. So there were ocean view rooms that will have families of 5 can actually go into, but a lot of the balconies were 4 could only fit in those. So we wanted to have a balcony. We did want to splurge because it was Alaska. That was where we really did want to put some money into it. So we wanted to have some kind of balcony. And we ended up getting joining balcony rooms that would hold up to 4 people each. And that ended up working very well for us. I mean, we could have gone into a suite and it would have been actually a little bit more, but having the 2 rooms, we absolutely love being able to do that.
And it just gives people a little bit of space. It gives the parents a little bit of space, which is nice. Extra bathrooms are always important.
Right. I mean, it's fantastic. Then we had 2 balconies that way. It worked out extremely well for our family.
Does the Joy allow you to open up the balconies at all to have those connect?
It does not. And I read online somewhere that they had done it in the past, but they just, for whatever reason, they just are not doing that. So we were unable to do that. And one other thing to point out with Norwegian is that when you do book a room, they do some of these various deals where they say, you get 2 deals free, whether it be upgraded dining or free drinks, and you can pick from these various deals. Well, it worked out because typically that's only the first 2 people in the cabin. So by having the 2 cabins, we were able to choose different packages basically that we wanted. And so for the adult room, we were able to get the beverage package and the dining. And for the kids' room, we did the dining and the internet. So that worked out well for us.
Oh, perfect. And then just for our listeners, what I was asking about with the balcony is on the newer Disney ships and on some ships across the industry, you can actually open up the partition in the balcony cabins so that there's that 1.5 foot or 2 foot little gap that you could actually see if you're looking at your balcony partition, that it looks different. They will actually remove that or open it or roll it back or do whatever it is one does with those so that those balconies can now become a larger balcony.
Yeah, and we've done that on the Disney ships before. We've done that a couple of times when we had 2 joining rooms. It just wasn't allowed. I don't know if it was just the sailing, but for whatever reason, our cabin steward told us they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's great when they can.
So that's a good thing to know on Norwegian, just because of the way they do their packages. Like you said, Carol, they only offer to the 2 people in the room. If you price that out between the 2 rooms and what the savings you get with the package, that could make a huge difference in the overall price. I'm wondering, is there any benefit to that on Disney at all, you guys? I'm not kind of drawing a blank. I'm not sure.
No.
There's nothing really a benefit-wise. Is there? Am I missing something?
I think a little bit. It depends. So, like, for instance, if we did 2 rooms before, we could, and you've got, for instance, people who are not diamond members, but platinum members, then you can get whatever benefits in each of those rooms. So that can be helpful.
Yeah, I was just going to actually say that. So I think the Castaway Club membership is kind of the only thing, but it is still a super useful thing. So we actually, because my mom is a single and we are a party of 3, sometimes in a single you pay what's called a single supplement, which means you have to pay for 2 people in the cabin. So you just pay the exact same price as if you sailed with 2, except you don't pay the taxes for that second person if there is no second person in the cabin. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll just throw either my husband or my son in my mom's room, and they are now her second person, and the only additional cost that cabin is incurring and it's paying for that third person is the port fees and the taxes. So with Platinum now, with Disney, in theory, if we decided to throw my husband in her cabin, he would get his Palo brunch and I would get a Palo brunch or dinner in my own cabin. So that would be the only, plus the Castaway Club gift, that could be different for Platinum versus Silver or Gold. So that's the only other, I guess, advantage I can think of. And when you go to register on Disney Cruise Line for your port arrival time and your shore excursions, obviously having somebody in the cabin that's Platinum puts you ahead of the game as well. And children don't seem to count for those benefits, I believe, anyway.
Yeah, and so we always put one adult in the other room, typically, which we didn't do that on this Norwegian cruise, and they allowed it, and we just had to sign. I don't know if you remember, Christy.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a pain.
And I'm sorry.
We had to sign something basically saying, yes, they're with us and we're joined together, but it worked out.
So there's some cruise lines will allow you to do this, where if you have an adjoining cabin and or you have a cabin that's considered close proximity, you can put the children in the second cabin. Except the one thing with Norwegian is because the children were children, they can't sign and accept the terms and conditions. And so Carol actually had to do their check-in by phone, or there was something that had to occur by phone, and an additional piece of paperwork that had to occur. And I believe the shore excursions had to be done by phone. instead of online because the children are children. So there was a disadvantage there, but the advantage is that for charging purposes and for money purposes and for where people were really sleeping purposes and room keys and all that, the kids were in one room and the adults were in another.
Well, and plus that gave us then that other package. We didn't want to have to, we wanted to get the drink package was part of it. And we wanted to make sure. So that worked out. It worked out. It was just a little bit of more work.
So if this sounds really confusing, talk to your travel agent and they'll help you navigate this. Well, let's kind of turn to the meat of the show. Talking about port excursions, it's really tough. We get this question, which I talked about at the beginning, a lot. Can you do a show about port excursions? Well, it's really tough because every family's different, and what might be good for our family might not be the best for your family. So I think this is a tough thing to kind of talk about sometimes, but today, let's kind of talk about how you guys save some money. And before we do that, just to kind of go over the itinerary, I've got it up here for you. They left out of Seattle. You had a day at sea. Then the ports you went to were Ketchikan, Juneau. Then you cruised up to Holcomb Bay Glacier. Then you went to Icy Strait Point, and then that quick stop in Victoria and back to Seattle. So thinking about the port excursions, Carol, how did you, what resources did you use to kind of come up with what you wanted to do?
Well, the first thing we always do is we look online and we look to see what the cruise has to offer through them, just to see what is around there, what do they have to do. I think that's always a really good starting point. Oftentimes we will pick something that we'll find that something through the cruise line. On this particular cruise, as you can imagine, Alaska can be quite pricey. And we were looking at trying to see how much money we could actually save and if there were things that we could do outside of just what they had to offer and kind of put that together ourselves. And that's what we ended up doing. Once we looked at some things that there were to do, like for instance, in Ketchikan, there was a bus tour that you could take to various points. And then I just started looking online and looking to see what people had posted about the bus tour. And then somebody said, Ketchikan's actually a really small little town. It's very easy to walk. And they even had a link to here's where a free walking tour is, and it hits the exact same spots as the bus. Now, not everybody can necessarily walk, but I will say it was only maybe 1.5 mile or 2 mile loop that we ended up doing all through downtown and hitting. We hit a museum in the beginning. We went to the salmon ladder. We hit the hatchery. We went to the Totem Village. We went to the National Park Center where they had an area as well to go see everything about the forest that was there. And then on the way back, we hit the Lumberjack Show, which happens to be right near where the boats pull up. So it's very easy in regards to being able to actually, now it rained a lot. It was Ketchikan. Ketchikan's a very rainy city, but we just made sure we had rain jackets and, walked everywhere we wanted to walk and saw what we wanted to see, and we were okay with the drizzle. But it really would, I think, depend on the person. And then we didn't, with 5 of us, we were looking at, I want to say it was $89 a person to be able to hit some of these things. And we kind of felt like, at least for this city, it looked like it was doable. And that's what we ended up doing.
I'd like to point out to the listeners too, because some people are like, but it's Alaska and it's, you're one time to Alaska, that at least for Carol's family for this trip, as she mentioned earlier, she was going for work. She booked this in the spring, like leading up to the trip. It was right before. So it was really a matter of a trip of convenience and a way to have her family spend the time together and to figure out if it was in their budget and not necessarily the only time they were ever going to be in Alaska.
Very true. Very true.
And also, as far as like the Lumberjack Show and whatnot, I love the idea that, through some research of your own, you saw that you could hit all these places without them actually driving you around or having somebody have the tour kind of bring you around to those places. So you save the money from there. Also, you can kind of do it on your own time. With the Lumberjack Show, were you able to walk up and get tickets there, or did you get those ahead of time?
No, I purchased them online. I just went right through their website and purchased them.
Okay.
And it ended up being a little cheaper because they had a kids rate, whereas on the cruise ship, it was the same price for adults or kids or anything because it was considered an excursion. So for whatever reason, theirs was the same price, and we were able to get a little bit of a discount that way.
Did you look at just excursions? Like, instead of using the excursion through Norwegian, did you look at like either through the Ketchikan Chamber of Commerce or whatever websites offer like the different tours out there? Did you kind of compare if you just set up the tour yourself versus doing it with Norwegian? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like going through a tour company to kind of give you that same experience? And what was the price like for them?
So we knew once I saw that Ketchikan was rather walkable and our family enjoys walking, we were totally fine with we're just going to go that route. So I honestly didn't anymore look into what other types of tours were available. But I did look at other tours such as like the float planes and the helicopter rides. And those are all very comparable in price to what the cruise line will offer. So I from what I found, it didn't look like there were going to be any big discounts actually going for some of those bigger tours that they have.
Yeah, so stepping off the boat and then trying to arrange either like a flight down the Misty Fjords is going to be the same as what you probably booked through on the ship.
That's what it looked like to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, this, I'm kind of making the point that you're already making, but when we went to the Caribbean last March, we met a family, Chris from Minnesota, and they rented a private boat for the day. And I was like, wow, that must cost a lot of money to rent a private boat to go around and go snorkeling. But he was kind of like your family, where I think he's got 4 kids. And when you price out individually, 6 people for an snorkeling excursion, it quickly becomes roughly about the same price as getting a private boat. And then you've got more leeway on what you want to do. And I never really thought about that before. But that was a whole different way that I hadn't really thought about as far as looking at those port excursions.
Right. I think the reason that it's close to the same price for like some of those float planes and the helicopter, et cetera, is that they only hold like maybe up to 4 people or 5 people. So it seems like, well, I don't know. But for whatever reason, it seemed like when we priced it out, they seemed similar because we did look at both options.
It's possible that the flight plane companies control those prices.
Yeah, that's very possible.
So from Ketchikan, you guys go to the capital of Alaska, Juneau. What did you find there as far as your research, and how did you save some money there?
So when we went to Juneau, we really wanted to see the Mendenhall Glacier. And my husband and I had actually been about 15 years prior and had taken the helicopter tour to the glacier. So we looked at the price, and it was about $600, and that was even through the cruise line or elsewhere per person. And so we were like, well, with family of 5, that's going to be a pretty penny. Let's find out another way we go to the glacier. And we've done that before. Maybe we'll take the kids again when they're older and do something like that. But for this trip, it just wasn't in our budget. So we looked at tours that would go to the glacier. The tours, of course, are per person, and it again added up very quickly. I think a lot of the bus tours are, close to about $100 a person, or they're getting upwards of there. And what I found was that there are cabs that come out actually up to the port. You can either call them and have them come ahead of time, and you can text them or send them a message ahead of time, or some of them are actually waiting up by the cruise ship, we found as well when we were there. And so they will take you out to Mendenhall Glacier. There is an option for a bus, a city bus, but with 3 little kids, we just did not want to go that route. We were much happier just paying for a taxi and going out there. Now, taxis will only take you about a mile before you get to the glacier, unless you make sure that you go with, and this is very important, there are specific companies that actually have paid an additional fee essentially to go all the way up to the very front and drop you off. And that's what we wanted to do. We made sure we were on one of those taxis that would take us all the way to the very front. It was called Evergreen Taxi, was the one that'll take you all the way there, because we didn't want to be doing that mile hike. So we took the taxi. It was fantastic. It was $35 each way. That basically, we had her phone number and we could call her. And that's one of the nice things that it's Alaska, is that your phone will work there. And we just called her beforehand and kept up with her in text messages on when basically we'd be done. And we thought that was fantastic, because when we looked at the time on how much time they give you at Mendenhall Glacier, you basically have to pick and choose what you can do there. So you can hike to the glacier and go to the waterfall and everything, but that'll pretty much take all your time if you go on one of the tours. Then that doesn't leave you any time to go explore the actual natural science area they have, or go to the bear trails where you can potentially see bears that are back there. And we were able to do all three of them. We had about 3 hours or so we ended up spending there, and then having them come back sort of at our leisure, if you will, to get back to the boat.
Did you see a bear?
We did not.
Oh.
But we did see one on the way back in the taxi.
Ooh.
So the taxi drivers will actually contact each other. Did you see a bear? Where'd you see the bear? And then they'll be like, oh, there's one over there. And you'll see people are pulled off to look at a bear. And it was just in the middle and the side, basically, of one of the roads that she had pulled off on. She wanted to bring us also to go see some eagles, which was amazing. We ended up seeing a ton of eagles, and she knew of another area where a lot of eagles hung out and kind of pulled up over there as well. She was just fantastic.
Oh my God. She was like a taxi driver tour guide.
Oh, it was like a personal tour. It was really, really amazing. And then she brought us to, there's this whale fountain that is the coolest thing. She's like, you got to get a picture over here. And she brought us over there, and it looked like this whale was breaching behind us. The way that you take the picture with the angle and everything was pretty amazing. And that was a lot of fun. And then instead of going back to the ship, we said, well, do you mind? We really like Red Dog Saloon. And she just dropped us off there, and we got to go check out Red Dog Saloon. And then Norwegian has free shuttles that'll take you then back to the boat from town. And it looked like all of the cruise ships had them, because you had to stand, make sure you were in the appropriate line for where your cruise ship was. And we just hopped back on. And then after we had our little lunch there and headed back.
Well, it sounds like an awesome day.
It was very awesome.
I think that's a great way to do it. We've done that twice in Europe, once in Athens, and then where the other one was. But we've done that twice where we've just gotten off the ship and negotiated with a cab that happened to be there. And they're locals. They drive all over the place. So a lot of times they have, that local knowledge of places to eat or different sites that you're not going to see on the bus tours. And like you said, Carol, it provided a lot more flexibility for being able to spend more time at the glacier and see a lot more things there. So I love the idea of using taxi drivers at least in Europe and up in Alaska. I'm not sure how well it works in the Caribbean. Christy, maybe you could speak to that.
So it works the same in the Caribbean. You just have to make sure that you've negotiated the price ahead of time. And it does actually depend. So in some of the locations, like St. Thomas and Tortola, they have those open air cabs where it's not going to be an individual family cab, but then you can sometimes ask where the additional drop-off is for the individual cab, or where you can pick up an individual cab. But otherwise, it's those open air cabs that are shared, and so everybody is going to the same location. So it's just a joint operation, and they'll do that in Mexico too, where you get off and you basically are standing there, and who's going to such and such beach, who's going to Playa Mia or whatever, and then they'll shove as many people as fit in whatever that car is in that car, and then you move on. Then you're with all these people for a set price. But then there's individual cabs where you can say, all right, we'd like to have you for the day, or would you like to give us a tour, or things like that. And so you would just negotiate that ahead of time. Just make sure there's a clear understanding of the price that you're paying before you get in the cab.
Excellent point there as far as make sure you negotiate that price ahead of time. The other place we used it in was Stockholm, Sweden. So it worked out great for us there as well. Carol, one of the big things that people like to do in Juneau is whale watch. Did you look into that at all, or did you price that out, or find any tips around that as far as booking something other than through NCL or the cruise lines?
We did, having the balcony, we did get to see a couple of whales. We didn't see as many as we thought we would see. But that wasn't as exciting to, I guess, our family. I know for a lot of people that's something they really want to do. And this sounds terrible, but, we've had annual passes to SeaWorld, and we go see the whales a lot. And I know that sounds very terrible living in Florida, but it just wasn't something that was necessarily up our alley, where we don't get to see glaciers, that's for sure. So we wanted to do that.
No, that's perfect. You get you get to do what you wanted to do. Well, from Juneau, you guys go up to, is it Glacier Bay that you guys went to, the Holcomb Bay Glaciers?
It's different.
Go ahead.
It is, okay.
It is different. And we ended up going to Young's Glacier because there was just tons of fog. They actually thought, because the weather was so bad, it was funny. This was the summer where it was supposed to be such a great summer for weather, and we ended up having the worst week out of the whole summer. Is what it ended up being. But it was fine. I mean, it didn't bother us. I think we're so used to the heat and the sun and everything all the time that we were super prepared, and it ended up being fine. But we were really nervous we were going to miss seeing the glacier, but they ended up bringing us to Young's Glacier, and it was the highlight of the trip. I mean, while we were navigating through just the scenery and being able to be on your balcony during it took almost an hour and a half to get over to it, but through this passageway and just going by all this floating ice and the seals all on the ice everywhere and just the little waterfalls as you go by. I mean, I can't even describe how amazing it was. And, the kids just would grab all the blankets from the bed and huddle up and sit there and get to watch everything. It was incredible. We really enjoyed it.
So I'm kind of curious about this next port that you guys go to. You go to Icy Strait Point. What did you find to do there that you were able to save money on?
As people may be aware, Icy Strait Point is kind of owned by the cruise lines, if you will.
And that's why I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. The whole little town there. We did not do an excursion either there. There were different things that you could do while you were there. And we decided, actually, the kids loved playing along the beach. There's like this beach area with tons of rocks, and kids would build up various things on the rocks and skip rocks in the water. And then we went into the little forest there, and that was actually very neat with the massive trees, and just walked through. It was actually the area back where you go to do, what's it called? Not zip lining. It is a little bit out, but though it's part of that zip line. But it's more like the adventure park portion where you put on the harness and you can walk through the trees and that sort of thing. But they actually have a trail through it as well, so you can kind of walk through and see some of that on your own. And we ended up just doing that. We did our shopping that day because there were some little places that you could shop. You could actually take, and it was only like $5, a little shuttle that would take you into town. But we weren't up for it at that point. We just wanted to kind of hang out around there. There was a bald eagle that was in one of the trees. We got to get a bunch of pictures of the bald eagle. And then we went over and there's like a crab restaurant that's right on the water with the biggest, sweetest crabs I've ever had in my entire life, these massive crabs. And we splurged on a nice lunch, just kind of enjoyed walking around. And that's sort of what we did.
Where did you have lunch?
And I'm trying to remember the name of it. I knew you were going to ask me that. I'm going to start looking it up while we're talking about something else.
Okay. Well, I mean, and that's a good point there too. A lot of times we feel like we have to entertain ourselves through whatever manufactured fun that the port adventures kind of provide us. But, just taking a day, Alaska is so beautiful, and just letting your kids kind of wander around the beach and maybe throw the rocks into the water, like you're saying. And that's cool. That's good to know that they have a trail that goes back through the forest like that too. So, I mean, if you don't live in this part of the country, it's just amazing to be able to spend some time walking through the forest and taking in the views of those trees and everything that it provides.
I agree. It looks so different for us. And so they really enjoyed that. They literally spent an hour and a half on the beach just playing with the rocks and all of that. So that was a lot of fun. And it was called the Crab Station.
And did they have food that wasn't crabs?
It was mostly crabs, I want to say, from what I remember.
That's good to know. I mean, because, some people aren't going to eat that, or myself included. Unfortunately, it looks so good, but I just cannot. I have not developed a taste for it.
Is it the taste, or is it the whole process, or what?
No, it's the taste.
Okay.
I like to swim with the seafood. I do not like to eat the seafood.
Well, and I'm allergic to lobster and shrimp, but not to crab. It's actually a different family, I found out. But anyway, so for me, it's always a challenge. I have to make sure that they don't mix the stuff and that sort of thing, which they didn't. But I ordered this giant crab drink, and it looked so cool. And it was on the menu, and it had it was like a Bloody Mary with a huge crab leg just stuck inside of it. I'm like, oh, I'm getting that. Well, I didn't realize when it came out, they'd thrown like 3 or 4 shrimp in it too. I was like, oh no, I can't drink the drink. So Anyway, they were nice and they made me something else, but they said they even used like shrimp juice inside the drink.
Geez.
So I had to be careful. Yeah. So that was out, but that's okay.
Dungeness crab is my favorite by far. I love Dungeness crab out here.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Well,
yeah.
what a great day. I kind of go back to our day we spent in Cannes when we were over in France, and we spent, I think we were on the beach for about 2 hours, and just our kids just ran back and forth on these rocks, and we're just having a great time just being kids. So good on you guys to have just a wonderful day in Icy Strait there. So
yeah, it was great.
You end up at sea, and then you do that touch into Victoria before you head back to Seattle. What did you guys have planned in Victoria?
We wanted to take the kids to Bouchard Gardens. We love Bouchard Gardens, and we'd been the last time that we were there, but we wanted to make our way out there, and they had excursions that would take you out. Well, I did some research, and kids, literally an entry fee into Bouchard Gardens is $2. It ends up being about $2 American dollars to get in for kids. Adults, it's whatever it was. I want to say it was like $25 or something like that. So the excursion for adults really didn't it wouldn't save that much money by taking a cab if you're just 2 adults and you're going out to Bouchard. But with 5 of us and 3 of them being kids, so we didn't pay that extra surcharge for that, and we're only paying for the cab, we ended up saving a fortune. And we actually took a cab there right outside, right when you dock. There were plenty of cabs that were coming through the line, and just told them we were going out to Bouchard Gardens, took the cab out there. And again, this guy was amazing. He knew Victoria in and out, and he took us down a couple side streets to show us some stuff before he headed all the way up there. And then he just gave us his card, said, call me when you're done, and, I'll come pick you up. So it was really great.
And for those people who've never been to Bouchard Gardens, and bear with me here, is kind of like for you Walt Disney World fans, it's kind of like the Osborne Lights.
Yes.
Go ahead. I know. Bear with me here.
Explain,
So
Steve.
people that have never heard of
Bouchard
Gardens, Bouchard Gardens was built in a quarry. It started in 1904 by Jenny Bouchard. And it's one of the most amazing places you've ever been. And she just started building this garden one by one and inside this quarry, and it just continued to grow and turned into what it is today. And it's just, if you have a chance to go there each year or each part of the season, they have different things blooming, and it's just so beautiful out there. And that's what I mean by the Osborne Lights. It started off with like one string of lights, and it just kept on growing. So that's where I'm trying to go with it.
So it started off by a family, and then it grew from there. So
yes.
That's the connection. Okay.
And for Disney fanatics out there, so in Epcot at Canada, all the beautiful flowers out front, that is a mini. They based that off of Bouchard Gardens. That's what we were told by one of the cast members.
No, I've heard that as well.
So there you go, Walt Disney connections all around the world. But
that's right.
Anything stand out on your visit to Bouchard Gardens that you want to talk about?
No, it was just awesome. They have a little carousel there, which was great for the kids. There was a huge area, like a field in the back where the kids could just run, and we let them do that for a little bit because they just get to the point where they're like, I just want to move around like crazy for a little bit. So you just send them off, let them run a little bit, and they had a great time. But they were even fascinated themselves. Oh, I do remember one other point I almost forgot. So in the very back, which people might not always make it to, and this is why it was so great that we had so much time at Bouchard Gardens that we could spend leisurely there is actually a boat ride you can take. We didn't do it the last time, but there's a little boat. It was like $10 or $12 a person, something like that, and they had a kid price. And for an hour and a half, it's an eco tour of just I can't remember the name of the river or the inlet there. That's right behind the gardens. And so the guy who gave us the tour, he was studying to be a marine biologist, and he had lived in Victoria's whole life, and his family, they were all from British Columbia for many, many decades. And he had the most fascinating information. We saw all kinds of stuff, all kinds of wildlife in the water and wildlife out around. And he gave a tour of some of the beautiful houses that were actually built on the water. And so it was just incredible. And for $12, I was like, wow, this is an amazing hour and a half. But I think that the amount of time that you get when you go through a tour group wouldn't allow for that much time. I mean, we really spent, I want to say 4.5 hours at Bouchard Gardens, which is a long time seemingly, but we did a lot.
I love those little gems. that you would never have even thought that would have been a thing, and then it turned out to be one of the best.
Oh, it was awesome. We saw seals out there and all kinds of stuff. It was fantastic.
Were you able to walk around Victoria, the downtown part? Because it's a pretty walkable city, too. If people don't want to adventure all the way out to the gardens, there's a lot to see downtown there.
Absolutely. So we had the cab driver drop us off there on the way back and just took a stroll, got some pictures, love seeing the Empress. It's always beautiful. I think we bought a couple of things in town and then just headed back.
And if anybody's into high tea, the Empress is very famous for that if you have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
So you guys head back to Seattle and back home from there. I love the creativity that you have on how you spent your time in each one of these ports. Kind of thinking back on it, is there anything that we missed that you want to talk about before we kind of finish up? And I got a couple more questions for you.
No, I can't remember anything that I've missed. It was an amazing trip.
Is there anything you would do differently?
Well, next time, the kids really, really wanted to do the dog sledding. And so I think with them maybe a little bit older, I'd love to go back in 2 or 3 years and save some money and actually do that dog sledding. But it just wasn't quite in our budget this time. It was pretty expensive, but that's our plan.
So Carol, you're talking before we started taping the show that you had some other tips that you sometimes use, whether it's on this or whether it's on Disney. What are some other kind of cost-saving tips that you've used over the years on your sailings?
Well, one of the things, we've done quite a bit of the Caribbean cruises, and one of the things that we like to do to save money is we'll actually use points. So I'm a Hilton person, but people who are Marriott or whatever, is you can use points at a hotel, and then you get the room for the day, but you also have access to using the resort at wherever that Caribbean city may be. And so we've done that before, and which is fantastic for all of us. And then we have access to the beach and the pool, etc. So that's one, I'd say, for the Caribbean that we've utilized. And we enjoy using those resorts. We've even done a resort for the day and actually paid for that particular, there's a website called resortfortheday.com that you can utilize. And they'll usually give you a credit for food too, if you want to go that route. And because we just kind of like when we're in the Caribbean to be somewhere that's kind of our spot, I guess, if you will, and to feel like you're in this resort area. We're not as big of a fan of the public beaches. We go to a lot of the public beaches here in Florida. So we like having a little bit of a different feel, if you will. But we do that for saving. We bring on our own, 12-pack or 24-pack of water. Disney does allow that when we cruise with Disney, or sodas as well. You can bring on sodas. Now, that's not necessarily, Disney has sodas on the ship, but there are other cruise lines that you have to pay extra, but they will allow you to bring sodas on. So look into that depending on the cruise you're going on. Also look at the alcohol policies for Disney. Having 2 bottles of wine per adult is plenty for us to bring on. And then they also allow you to bring some on at the ports, or a 6-pack of beer per person. And that can certainly save you some money, especially if it's something that you just want to be sitting on the balcony. We always like to make one of those bottles our champagne so that we have something to sail away with. And that just little things here and there can really help, I guess, because things add up, as everybody knows. So we look for those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that's great. Just for the listeners, Disney is the only line as of right now that allows beer to be brought on. And then Disney's also the only ship that allows you to bring on alcohol at the port. Not alcohol, but
beer or wine. Right.
Beer and wine at the port that you can consume during the cruise. So the rest of the cruise lines do require that you check it if you bring it on during the cruise, and you'll get it back at the end.
Right. So that's very helpful.
Well, with a family of 5, wherever you could save money, I totally appreciate that. And that just allows you to cruise more.
I agree. I'm all about that.
So as we kind of finish up, I know that you guys always have something planned. What's next for your family?
Well, we have a couple of cruises. We've got actually one on Carnival out of Jacksonville coming up in January. It's a 4-night, just a quick one that we can actually go over the weekend. The kids only miss a day of school. It works out really well. And then we have one next October. We're going on the Magic out of New York up to Canada. So I'm really excited about that one.
I so want to do that.
I've been wanting to do that. I'm so excited. There were only 2 cruises, it looked like, this next fall. So from what I could tell, unless I just didn't look at all of them, but it was very limited in regards to what they had available.
No, they really cut back after they did last year where they went all the way up to Quebec City. They just really cut them back next year, and I don't know if it's because they didn't fill those cruises, but I that's totally one of our bucket list ones. So we'd love to have you back on when you do that one, because we haven't talked to, I don't think anybody, have we, Christy, about sailing up to Canada?
Len Testa.
Oh, that's right, Len did, I guess. So we talked to him a little bit about, and he did one of those that went all the way up to Quebec City. So
yeah, I'm excited. My kids have been dying to go to New York too, so this will be their first time in New York City.
So a couple days in the city before you guys head on the cruise, or afterwards?
We're planning beforehand.
Okay.
So we'll just have you reference back our New York City episode that we did with Marcus Monroe, where he talked about some of his favorite things, favorite place to get pizza, and some other options for what to do in the city.
Yeah, High
that sounds great.
Everything else too. So, well, Carol, thank you so much for coming back on. We really appreciate it. We love all your experience. I know you've got a lot of experience cruising, and thank you so much for coming back on and sharing that with our listeners today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really enjoy it.
All right, all the best to you and your family over the holidays, and we will look forward to talking to you soon.
Sounds great.
Bye.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Carol for coming on and sharing her and her family's experiences as they sailed on Norwegian Cruise Line up to Alaska this past summer, and giving us kind of a rundown on how they saved some money. Obviously, you could tell that we recorded this quite a while ago. It was just a little bit before the holidays. And once again, I do apologize for taking so much time to get it out. We wanted to get it out earlier in the year, but as the COVID kind of 19 thing started hitting and the cruise line started shutting down, just decided we'd save it for this summer. This is when the Wonder would normally be up there sailing along with a lot of the other ships up into Alaska. So kind of give you a taste of, even though they're not sailing right now, for those of you who are planning or want to go to Alaska, you get a taste of it now here in the summer when you possibly could be. And hopefully next summer, for those of us and those of you who may have something booked up in Alaska on the Wonder or on other cruise lines, we will all be up there sailing next year. So next week we will have a trip report on the Disney Wonder up in Alaska that took place last year as well. So we'll look for that coming up next week. The DCL podcast is a listener-sponsored program. We do not run any ads or anything like that. If you would like to learn how you could support our podcast, you can go over to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the information over there. Also, if you have time, we'd love it if you'd go over to iTunes and leave us a review. That helps us get our podcast known out in the podcasting community and helps other people who are looking for content on Disney Cruise Line or cruising in general to find our show, and that just helps us grow our audience, and we do appreciate each and every one of you that takes the time to do that. So between now and our next show, if you are heading out on an adventure, some kind of alternative adventure, or just a staycation out there, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we want to wish you all the best. Be well out there, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.